For the latest in our series of interviews for UK Cigar Scene magazine, I'm really delighted to welcome Richard Paterson this morning. Richard is the master blender for whiskey maker Whyte Mackay and is known the world over as the Nose. And I happen to know that he also likes a cigar. So Richard, welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
And I wanted to start by asking what got you into the whiskey business in the first place?
Well, it's really down to my father and my grandfather, who were whiskey blenders. My great-great-grandfather was Sir William Paterson, who established the Bank of England way back in 1694, and he loved the smell of money. But thankfully, my father and my grandfather, they loved the smell of whiskey, and that's really been in my body ever since, because I started with my father when I was only 8 years old.
You started around whiskey when you were 8 years old?
Yes, because what he wanted to do more than anything, he wanted to introduce me to his world.
Right.
And he decided one day to take my twin brother and I into the heart of Glasgow, into his Stockwell Bond. And it's really a day that I would never forget, because the bustle, the noise of the city was going on, and we went up this lane and he unlocked the doors of this huge warehouse and pulled the doors open. And even before we had stepped into his world, the smell of whiskey engulfed my nostrils. And I said, you know, what's going on here? But I could see the silhouettes of the casks in the background, but the smell of whiskey, Madeira's wines, was no of interest. So my brother and I started fooling around, which annoyed my father intensely. So much so that he took a Valinch, he opened one of the casks, and he dipped it in, and he took a glass, a copita glass, and filled it with whiskey. And he said, since you think it's so funny, why don't you tell me something about this whiskey? So I picked the glass up in a stupid way, which annoyed my father, and I said, Dad, I don't know what you mean. That's when he lost his temper, because he hit me at the back of the head. And I said, what did you do that for? He says, you're being stupid. I want you to look at the whiskey. I want you to smell it, to go right into the heart of it. Is it as heavy as your grandfather? Is it as light as your mother? Is it perhaps as sweet as your chocolate bar? Or is it as dry as the dust on the floor? So from that early beginning, I could see, yes, it was heavy and grumpy like my grandfather, but it had that sweetness. And that was really the beginning of Scotch whiskey. And ever since then, something inspired me, something was embedded in me, and that's why it's been with me for the rest of my life.
So I was going to ask whether it's something you're born with or something you learn, but it sounds like this is the start of a process of education.
It is, and actually that's the heart of it all. It is about education, because you must remember, when I started in a company called A. Gillis and Company way back in 1966, how did I get the job? Because of my father. And that is the biggest regret, because it was because of my father I got the job. It annoyed people, and they all said, well, what do you know? You obviously know something about Scotch whiskey. But then within a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I learned immediately, actually I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't know anything about wines as well. So that's why I base my career on knowledge is power. When the executive stops learning, he's finished. So I studied wines for 15 years, diploma, everything else. That's why I've got a ceremony tonight. But more importantly, I really studied whiskey. And that's why I'm studying it even today.
And you're still learning?
Still learning, after nearly 50 years coming up.
Wow, wow. So when you actually set about learning, what was it? What is it? How do you learn? How do you start that process?
First of all, you've got to know the family that you're coming into. What is the family? It's the family of Scotch whiskey. How many distilleries are there? Well, when I started, there was 120. Now today we have 109 distilleries. They come from 4 main areas: the Lowlands, the Highlands, the Campbelltons, and the Islas, engulfing obviously the Speyside up in the Highland region. These are people that I've got to get to know. I've got to find out when they were born, how they mature, how they went to university, and how they have retired. And so that I can use these whiskies and then combine them together. The same as the tobacco. The filler, the wrapper, the binder have all different component parts, and it's making it harmonize together. but you must get to know the tools first before you can blend it.
So when you start a process, the process of creating a new whiskey or a new blend, how does that work? How do you?
First of all, you've got to find out what kind of blend are you looking for, or even a single malt. Are you looking for something light, medium, or heavy? I mean, these are the simple bands. What age has it got to be? Is it 3 years old, 50 years old, 25 years old? That kind of style. What is the aftertaste? Is it going to be a long aftertaste? We talk about aftertaste in wine. Whiskey just goes on and on and on. But once you know these basic ingredients, then you put it together. But remember, it's only the beginning. It's like having a love affair. What do you do when you fall in love with your partner? You sort out your differences. Once you sort out your differences, then you get engaged. So hopefully by the time you get engaged, you really know your partner, what she or he is up to, and then you can settle down. Once you've sorted that out, you then get married. And it will be a good marriage if you have got to know each other. That's what I must do with my whiskies.
And how many whiskies have you created, do you reckon, through your career?
Probably thousands, and
Right.
probably, won't be short of 1 million whiskies that I've nosed,
Wow, that's an enjoyable job.
Somebody's got to do it.
So I've watched some of your wonderful videos where you explain how to taste a whiskey. So just explain a little about how you do that, because I was amazed at how it's a very technical view you take of how actually you taste a whiskey in your mouth.
Well, I have to say immediately there are certain ways, but out there in this world here, unfortunately, a lot of people really don't know. It just annoys me intensely. First of all, you've got to have the right glass. The Copa Capita glass that's shaped like a tulip will hold that. So what you do is you swirl it around. First of all, I will throw the whiskey on the floor because the lip of the glass can have certain odors that you want to eliminate. So by flicking it around and flicking it on the carpet, that's why I've got the most expensive carpet in Great Britain up in Glasgow there. But once you've got the glass ready, you put it in the glass. Then you hold it at the bottom. You make sure your hand is away. You swirl it around, bring it up and say hello. But you've really got to get the glass right into your nose. Then you pull away again. Then you say, how are you? You forget about the alcohol and go into the heart of the whiskey. And once you go in there, you will see all the different notes. Like a woman's perfume, it will have 26 different nuances. There always will be a top note. So that top note, vanilla, honey, spice, orange, tangerine, vanilla, all these kind of things will be embedded in there, but you've got to look for it. So you swirl it around, put it in there, keep it there, keep it there, keep it there. Once you've nosed it, then you come to taste it. So say it was a 20-year-old single malt, you would keep it at least 20 seconds in the top of the tongue, underneath the tongue, back in the middle, keep it there, then let it go down. The longer you keep it in your mouth, the more you'll extract the flavors. That's why, to enjoy great food, the more you chew it, the more you'll extract the flavors. But sadly, out there, they just knock it back sometimes, on many occasions, like a cowboy. Or they drown it in soda water, drown it in Coca-Cola, or put that horrible stuff called ice in it that just freezes it, masks it. You don't need that. All you need to do is to get to know that whiskey very slowly. It's all about time.
And so the point about a whiskey having to have a little water with it or something like that. Water.
You're very correct there.
Right.
If you want to, we have a collection called the Dalmore collection, Constellation collection. They're all at natural strength. There's 21 bottles, which will set you back nearly £197,000 just for that 21 bottle set. So when you come to smell it, and can go up to a 50, 52, 54% alcohol, even up to 56% alcohol. The best way, if it's too strong for your palate, even though it might be an aged whiskey, just a little still water, and I'm only talking a small drops of still water, not sparkling, will start to open it up.
Right.
Because if you and I were having a drink and I went like that, and I looked at you and you were going like this, Nix, what's wrong? Yeah. Oh, nothing, Richard, nothing. No, you're not talking to me. You're actually talking to the whiskey because you're finding it too strong.
Yeah.
So by adding that little bit of water, it'll open up and then it'll become a pleasing affair.
Right, right, I understand. Now, I believe you also, well, I know you're enjoying a Partagas P2 there, so you're a cigar man too. Is there a similarity between the way you enjoy and taste a cigar to the way you
absolutely.
a whiskey?
I mean, a cigar, a great cigar with the moment. And, you know, Partagas, I've always been a great fan of. I like the Cohibas, I like the Romeo and Julietas, the Upmans as well. But really, a cigar with the body, the character, the sort of, you know, that sort of barky flavor, that sort of peppery notes, and sometimes these spicy notes with the citrus does come out. But it can actually harmonize and complement a great whiskey taken at the right time. The ideal is really coffee, whiskey, and a cigar. All these three, you and I could talk all night just taking these three together because of their perfect combination. But unfortunately, there's a lot of restrictions nowadays which prohibits some of these enjoyments, which I find a little frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but when you taste it in your mouth, you taste it in a similar way?
Yes.
The cigar?
You keep it longer in the mouth,
right,
and then just keep it there, and then, you know, with the whiskey, with the cigar,
right,
just keeping it there and really enjoying it. But really taking it from the beginning, the middle, and the end.
right.
Sometimes I tend to smoke my cigars in a little bit of a hurry, because time's always there.
Yeah.
But if you do get that ambience that you can really relax and enjoy it, you'll find these changes going on and how enjoying it, you know, the real enjoyment. I find it just about beyond halfway is where I really get the enjoyment from.
Excellent. So talking then about your love of cigars, do you find that enjoying a fine cigar then has an impact on your ability to taste a whiskey, or complementary?
I think it's a combination of both. You've got to be very careful. I mean, there's no way that I'll start smoking a cigar first thing in the morning if I'm going to look at and create a blend. Right. Because my hands, my clothes, everything, even the room up in Glasgow is absolutely silent in this wonderful ambience we've got here in this room. This is nice and quiet. There's an ambience about it, and it gives me that sort of control. So I would actually do my blending or my nosing without any cigars, but once I'm finished at night, then that is the best time to relax and then reflect of what I've done. Because remember, you know, when we create a blend, when I look at the sample and then leave it and nose it, I'll put it back, I'll put it there, and then I'll leave it overnight. It's got a hood on it, the air's trapped, but the bouquet is kept there. And then maybe have a cigar, maybe think about it, and then go back the next day and how is it shaping up?
Right.
Is the decision that I made the day before okay? Yes, it is. We can go with it.
Right.
Or we have to change it slightly, you know.
And within the Dalmore range, you've got a specific cigar malt.
Yes.
So how did you go about creating that specific blend?
Well, way back in 1980s, we were owned by Jim Beam in America, obviously the famous bourbon company. And what I did notice at the 80s, there was more, you know, quantity rather than quality. The cigar world in America was absolutely booming. And I thought every time I drank Dalmore and smoked cigars, I could see the combination. And I thought, well, why don't I create a cigar malt, the Dalmore cigar malt? And it was launched, we actually started looking at that way back in 1979, but it would be, you know, just about the early 80s when we put it into America. And it was a success. It was, people said, what's that? Oh, that's a cigar malt. But then people started to look at it in a different way and thought, wait a minute, is the cigar malt mean that you've matured your Dalmore single malt whiskey in tobacco leaves? And I went, no. And then there was the cigar ban and all the, you know, sort of prohibition against smoking and all these kind of things moved in. So we decided, well, I didn't decide, somebody else decided to change it to a name called the Grand Reserva. So we changed it and we told people, actually, this is the same as the cigar malt. It's called Grand Reserva. And people used to say, Grand Reserva, what does it mean? Well, it means that obviously something that's very old, it's reserved, but this is the same makeup. and people just didn't buy it. And that's the long and short of it. So nearly coming up 4 years now, we relaunched the Dalmore Cigar Reserve. But today, that sort of ratio, that blend, that assemblage has changed quite dramatically. It is now 70% Oloroso sherry butts from Jerez de la Frontera, 20% American White Oak, and a 10% coming from Cabernet Sauvignon from Chateau Haute Marbouzy in Saint-Eustache in Bordeaux. And this combination, especially with the Cabernet, gives it that softness, richness, and it's at 44%. So if you're smoking and you've got that weight of the alcohol and the cigar, it's perfect. But if you don't like cigars, it's still a fabulous single malt because it's been dressed. 80% of that single malt has had a new, if you want to put it, Viagra. It's really freshened it up, and it makes it very, very complimentary with a cigar or without a cigar.
Excellent. And as a cigar man yourself, as someone who loves a cigar, have you been to Cuba? Have you seen the
I've seen some of the plantations, but the last time I was there was, I've been twice, but the last time I was there was actually to present our whiskey, our Whyte Mackay 21-year-old, and the cigar malt, which went on to win the best cigar with the best whiskey. That was an accolade that I'm very proud of. But that was the beginning of our association with Cuba Tobacco, that was sponsoring Scotch whiskey, and they were trying to help and bring more awareness of Cuba to the rest of the world. But I didn't stay long enough. It was only a fleeting visit. Right. I like to get amongst the vineyards, amongst the distilleries, amongst the tobaccos, see it and smell the people and smell the land, and then you can associate and start to own that cigar and really appreciate the work, the back-breaking work that these people have to do in the selection process.
Yeah. And can you see similarities then between creating a whiskey and creating a cigar?
Absolutely. If you're looking for a style of tobacco, a style of spiciness, and you're going to use the different leaves and what have you and create it, you're going to mix all these leaves together and then you're going to get a smoke. But sometimes it doesn't work and you've got to go back. Has it matured? Have we really used the right tobaccos? Well, it's the same with the whiskey. When I put the whiskeys together, is this the right wood it's been in? No, well, maybe it needs another wood, but it's missing something. I always remember, the story of the masters creating a song, that sort of, that song that's going to be different from the rest, that makes it stand out from the crowd. And once they hit the right notes, that right music, that right melody, then they know they've got it. Well, it's the same that I look at, I think the same for the tobacco, with the cigar, with the whiskey. You get the right notes, everything comes together.
So if somebody offered you a job swap and said, Richard, you could become the master blender at Partagas or at El Leguito, what would you think?
To be a master blender, a master, creator for Partagas would be lovely. But I have to be honest. My roots have always been in Scotland. I think they'll always will be. There's something magical about going up to the distilleries in Scotland, seeing where they're located, seeing where the river is, where they draw their water, walking into the warehouse, seeing the stills, and then seeing the spirit, but then walking into the warehouse, the same as I did with my father, and then smelling these whiskies maturing and seeing it and feeling it. That's going to take a lot for me to change over.
I've been to El Leguito, and I've been into the blending room there.
Yeah.
And there's a huge guy there who's the blender, and they have cabinets which they keep the tobacco in.
Yes.
I'd love to see the two of you together in there. That would be the most fantastic thing, because the smell.
Yes.
In these, they just open the cabinet.
Yeah.
Bang.
But it's really when you meet somebody like that and you see the leaf and then you pick it up and you smell it. And I've got a lovely picture of Gino smelling the tobacco, but really finding out why are you smelling it, what are you looking for,
Yeah.
and are you already thinking in your mind when you see it, well, what can I do here? Because when I go to Bordeaux, Burgundy, Alsace, or even Madeira or Marsala, and I see the wines there, especially in the sherries, and they say, have you tried this sherry before? As soon as you smell that different wine, you say, wait a minute, I'm picking up notes. Have you got an older wine? Yeah, what about this one? Yeah, but it's still in the wood. Well, what about this? And wait a minute, that's what I'm looking for. So you click in and say, that smell of that wine will help to seduce this whiskey, which I know is 15 years old, 16 years old, and the two will then come together and rise.
Yeah.
So it's that combination, but it's something, it's inside you that you know. When we created, I mean, when you think about this lovely cigar, and I think about the Dalmore King Alexander, that's the only single malt in the world with 6 different finishes. I'm taking my 1992 Dalmore, I'm putting it into port, Madeira, Marsala, Cabernet Sauvignon, small batch bourbon, and Methuselah sherry. And these are 6 separate assemblages, aging differently. You know, the Cabernet will be 18 months, 4 years, 5 years for the others. And then I put them together, and then I adjusted it, and it is one of the most fabulous single malts. It has this, because every time you smoke this, you get other notes. Every time you drink it, oh, I'm getting a different note there. I'm getting more notes there. So it's the same as the cigar in many, many ways.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're going to finish off with today with the 3 questions, the 3 standard questions we ask. So, your favourite place that you'd like to smoke a cigar?
I will come back to the same thing. I love to smoke a cigar with friends at dinner time. But my ultimate, because of its situation, I love to smoke outside on a very warm summer's day. Now, it can be anywhere in the world as long as it's comfortable, the temperature's comfortable. There's nothing more wonderful finishing off a dinner with a great coffee, then the cigars and that ambience. And that's happened to a few occasions, especially in Jerez de la Frontera with the Gonzalez Baez family, where they have that sort of open veranda. We smoke the cigars and the smoke just disappears, but the ambience of it makes it really special.
Wonderful. Now, probably the easiest question for you of all, what do you like to drink with a cigar?
Well, depending on the moods, but normally speaking, I always like my Dalmore. Dalmore will always be associated with cigars. It has brought me into the world of many different styles, the Partagas in particular. So the Dalmore King Alexander and the Dalmore Cigar Reserve are both classics, along with many others, because I've got a lot of beautiful whiskies in there that will always go well with the cigar.
Excellent. And finally, the finest cigar that you ever smoked, or the one that you remember?
That's a difficult one, but it's not so much the finest, it's the most memorable. One that really does stand out was when I created, just about 2 years ago, the Dalmore Paterson collection. That's a collection of 12 bottles, and it's housed in Harrods in a beautiful cabinet, specially designed. That will cost you £987,500 just for 12 bottles. So when I created these 12, I went and looked at different cigars, and we got to cigar, I think it was number 8 or 9, maybe 9 in the collection of great whiskies. And they brought out this one and said, well, Richard, why don't you try this? And I said, well, it's a very long one. It says, well, it's a Cohiba Bahiki 56. I said, okay, let's have a look at it. And there was 4 of us, smelling and tasting the whiskey. And we just lit up, and it just seemed to calm us. It was that sort of air of tranquility. We were just taken back by the quality of this particular cigar. And we really began to relax, and we were dumbfounded for, a matter of minutes, because it just seemed to hold us. And that matched perfectly with that. It was a 1966 Dalmore, absolutely a classic, and it really worked perfectly. So that memory of that cigar just clicking but really giving us the warmth and the enjoyment of company and the cigar made it very special.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, one thing's for certain is that I'm going to go home this evening and have a glass of whiskey, and I'm going to taste it in a completely different way. So I've learnt a huge amount today. So thank you very much indeed for that, and thanks for a great interview. It's been marvellous.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.